Hey everyone, it's Howard Gearhauser on the line. You have my dad, Dr. Richard Gearhauser. Dad, can you hear me okay?
Yes, hear you loud and clear.
Fantastic. So in today's video, we are going to go through 10 cutting edge strategies that you can use to mitigate stress. Now, in the United States, stress has become an epidemic. In fact, over 50% of Americans are suffering from chronic stress. So not only does stress make you feel anxious or depressed and just this yucky feeling, it actually is a precursor for many health conditions like chronic fatigue, cognitive issues, sexual dysfunction, you name it, stress plays a role. So it's really important that we learn to reduce stress, or at the least manage our stress levels so we can live happy, peaceful lives and not let stress get the best of us. So Dad, from a scientific standpoint, can you explain a little bit more about the stress response and what's going on within our bodies?
All right. Well, if you think of stress, you could think of a wild animal. You mentioned the tiger. So let's say an antelope is grazing and a tiger is stalking that animal. And so that the animal is kind of in a balance between stress and recovery. While they're eating, that's a process of recovery. But then they catch a scent of the tiger and they go on to the alert mode. So they know that this tiger is an imminent threat to their life. So they go into a mode where they release hormones from their adrenal gland that basically release energy from everywhere so it's available. So there's no energy available for recovery or repair, because recovery or repair is not important if in the next 30 seconds a tiger is going to kill you. Your body is designed for, don't worry about anything else except a higher blood pressure, a higher heart rate, so you can run or you can fight. Okay, but modern stress, as you mentioned, is typically not a life-threatening thing for us. And because it comes from so many different things in the modern environment, we're constantly bombarded by the media, by bad things happening all over the world, and we hear about it on the news, and we have to go to work and we have to pay our bills, and we have a mother-in-law that we don't like and we have to deal with her, and all these different stresses that come upon us now that, like you say, keep an average person in a stress response 90% of the time. Well, if that happens, you're going to age fast and you're going to get all the diseases, or you're going to be more prone to get all the diseases of our modern society, what we call our modern diseases, that a lot of them didn't even exist 100 years ago, like heart attacks and Alzheimer's disease and autoimmune diseases going crazy, cancer going crazy, osteoporosis, obesity, depression, just on and on and on. We can tie, all of these have been tied in to stress in one way or another.
Exactly, and we have more and more stressors today than we ever have in the history of mankind, at least from the evidence that we've seen. So it's really important that for the next 10 protocols that you grab a notepad and a pen so you can jot these down, because the knowledge is great, but you're going to want to make sure you're implementing these as soon as possible, especially if you're stressed out, because these things can take you out of that stress response pretty quickly. That's why we're sharing them with you. Our intention for this video is to help humanity become less stressed out. So let's dive right into this. The first one, which is really important, sounds a little hippy-dippy, but is scientifically validated, is to go watch the sunrise. So watching the sunrise sets what's called the circadian rhythm. In 2017, the circadian mechanism was awarded the Nobel Prize. So this is really profound stuff. Dad, can you elaborate a little bit more on how the sunrise sets the circadian rhythm and how this relates to stress?
All right. Well, one of the big factors for setting the circadian rhythm. So the circadian rhythm is a clock mechanism that's in every cell of our body, and it controls everything that happens, including the release of hormones, including the stress hormones, and including the anabolic hormones are kind of the opposite. The stress hormones are thought of as catabolic because they tear us down, because it's just worried about survival over the next 30 seconds, whereas the anabolic hormones are made to, to build us up, and the circadian mechanism keeps it in balance. Now the sun, the light from the sun enters our eye, it activates a molecule in our eye that sends a signal to the master clock in the brain. So the master clock in the brain, you have the opportunity every day to set it again. So most people don't set it properly because they don't see the sunrise. So if you don't set your circadian rhythm properly, the way it was designed and has been functioning for millions of years in humans, our human ancestors, if we don't set it, then it isn't going to, work with the light and day cycles. And that's what the circadian rhythm is. It's our physiology in tune with the daytime and the nighttime.
And one thing to add about watching the sunrise, you want to make sure that you're exposing your eye to the sunlight directly, meaning don't be wearing contact lenses or prescription glasses or sunglasses or looking through your car window. Make sure that your eyes are directly meeting that sunlight. That's really important for setting the circadian rhythm, as well as getting a multitude of other health benefits from that morning sun. So that's the first one. Go start watching the sunrise. You'll feel amazing. It also secretes dopamine, which makes you feel better, but also makes you goal-oriented and can take you out of that stress zone. So make sure you're doing that. One other thing about the sunrise, before you go out there, don't be on your phone and checking Instagram and reading the news. Try to see the sunrise as almost the first thing you look at after you wake up. I think that's really important. That way you can really get the full benefit and not put yourself into a negative train of thought from reading the news, as an example. So that's number one. Go watch the sunrise.
Yeah, let me just add there that as far as that sunlight, if you expose your eyes to artificial blue light before the sunrise, then you've given your setting of your master clock, you've done it out of sync with the sun. So if you have to have a light on before the sun comes up, wear blue blocking glasses, so that it's the blue that sets the circadian rhythm, the blue that's in the sunlight, but it's also in our artificial lights in our cell phone screen and on our computer monitors and our televisions. So if you're going to watch television, you got to be on your computer before the sun comes up. Wear blue blocking glasses. We talk about that a lot, so you can find out which ones to get, but they're amber or orange colored glasses that block the blue. And that way that sun is the first blue light that hit your eyes in the morning. So you set your clock when it's supposed to be set, because the whole idea is setting it in tune with the day and the night.
Yeah, and that's a perfect segue actually into tip number 2, which is block artificial light at night. So yeah, you want to block it before you get that morning sunlight. Otherwise, you're throwing off your circadian rhythm and you'll secrete the stress hormone at the wrong time and maybe way too often, which is cortisol. So you want to wear those before you see the sunlight, but you also want to wear those at night because you don't want your, let's say, cell phone or smartphone or your computer screen imitating the sun and tricking your brain into thinking it's daytime, where certain hormones are supposed to be secreted at different times of the day. If your brain thinks it's daytime when it's nighttime, everything's going to be thrown out of whack. Can you elaborate a little bit more on the importance of blocking blue light, especially at night?
Yeah, so the blue light sets the master clock, and if you set your master clock to sunrise and it's 9 o'clock at night, that isn't good, but that's something we do. Now we know shift workers, those are people that don't work, during the day shift, so they have odd hours. They have a lifespan that's 6 years shorter. So it's correlated to obesity, diabetes, mortality, you name it. So you pay a price if you don't follow this rule, and it increases your stress and it increases your susceptibility to the dysfunction that comes along with stress.
Exactly. So again, really important that you're blocking that artificial light. You can wear the blue blocking glasses. There are different applications that you can download for your computer or your smartphone that remove the blue light. So go look into those. There's several options, but you're going to want to make sure that you're doing that. It's really important to keep that circadian rhythm intact, not just from a stress standpoint, but just to keep everything operating in tune with that master clock and the day and night cycles of the earth is incredibly important, because we have hundreds of thousands of chemical reactions happening every second in every single cell, and we have trillions of cells within our body. So it's much easier to just kind of go with nature and stay in sync than going against nature and breaking all of these rules. It's part of our problem. So the third thing you need to do is stimulate your parasympathetic nervous system. So this is kind of the opposite of the sympathetic, which is a fight or flight stress response. The parasympathetic is the restoration and relaxation side of the nervous system. So there's a lot of different ways that you can do this. There's meditation, there's breath work, there's sound baths, there's all sorts of things that you can do that put you into that restful zone. And I want to share with you one that I think is really easy and that can take you out of the stress response and put you into the parasympathetic nervous system relatively quickly. So the first thing that you want to do is put your hands on your heart like this. This is going to put your awareness into your heart. So literally put your hands over your heart or heart center like this and just close your eyes and focus on that area. And then you want to slow down your breathing. I like to do about 4 seconds in, 4 seconds out. And then do that for 30 seconds, a minute, 5 minutes, whatever you need to get out of the stress response. And then once you've kind of reached this neutral position where you're not feeling stressed out, the next thing you want to do is think about something you're super grateful for, super appreciative of. I personally like to think of my puppy. So I think about her with my eyes closed, and it's amazing. You can rewire the stress response to put you into a state of pure gratitude if you practice that enough. It's really simple too. You don't have to go meditate for an hour. I like to meditate for an hour just because I get in this blissful zone, and we can talk about that in another video. But this is a really easy, quick way to get out of that stress response and also recognize all of the things you have to be grateful for. Anything you want to add there?
Yeah, so the vagus nerve is the main nerve of the parasympathetic nervous system. So the vagus nerve, vagus means wandering in Latin. So the vagus nerve wanders from our organs. It innervates our heart, and then it innervates our brain, goes up into our brain. So it is basically the rest and recovery part of the nervous system, the parasympathetic nervous system. So we need to activate that way more in this matrix society that's putting all these pressures on us from different directions, from every direction. We got these pressures on us. So our vagus nerve in the average person is rarely stimulated. So you can look online for, I see 30 ways to stimulate the vagus nerve or 12 ways to stimulate the vagus nerve. So meditating is a good way, but there's many other ways: sounds, chanting, all kinds of different ways, certain music. Just getting out in nature and sitting next to a tree will stimulate your vagus nerve. So stimulate your vagus nerve as a shortcut way without having, as Howard said, to sit down and meditate for an hour like a monk. You can just use a hack to stimulate your vagus nerve. And then as you progress, I think spending an hour of meditation each day would be a good thing to do. And we encourage that.
Right. And the other thing too is, as my dad kind of mentioned, we spend so much time in the sympathetic nervous system. You have to make a conscious effort to stimulate the parasympathetic nervous system, because if you just continue doing things the way you have, clearly the sympathetic nervous system's far more dominant within our society. That's how we kind of are controlled, is if we stay in the stress response, we cannot think outside of the box. We're like survival now. So you have to consciously stimulate the parasympathetic. And I gave you one technique that I love that's super easy, but like my dad mentioned, there's a ton of different ways to do it. So go do your research on that. So let's move on to recommendation number 4, and that's getting electrically connected to the earth through grounding. So going barefoot on the earth has a multitude of health benefits, including stress reduction. But I'll hand it over to you for this one. Can you just elaborate a little bit more on the benefits of grounding?
So grounding is where you're connected to the earth. physically connected with an electrical connection. So the Earth acts as an anode to the sun, which is a cathode, and anodes on their surface have a negative charge. And so that negative charge will actually come up into us if we allow it. So think of humans have always been barefoot or maybe worn moccasins or something. But nowadays we wear the athletic shoes, most of the time, or even all the other shoes, even the fancy dress shoes nowadays, they have non-conducting materials in the sole. So we have completely cut ourselves off when we're walking outdoors, cut ourselves off from this negative charge, which is anti-inflammatory, and it reduces stress by itself. They've done studies, they're small studies, this is something that has not been studied a lot, but the negative charge is not something that is a controversy. The surface of the Earth has a negative charge. Another thing that's not a controversy is that our physiology today tends to build up a positive charge. One, because we're never grounded, and two is because of the stress response increases inflammation, and inflammation basically is a positive charge, extra protons. So we want to neutralize those protons with the negative charge of the Earth. And that's what, we have always done until around 1950, when everyone switched to these non-conducting shoes. And now, because we don't even go outdoors, and rarely do people go barefoot, and rarely do they go out without the non-conducting shoes. And even with that, we're only outdoors 5% of the time on average. And in our houses, typically because of carpets and wood floors and different things, we're never grounded. And if you're never grounded, you're going to always have this low-grade inflammation. So you've got the stress in your life creating inflammation, and then being ungrounded, creating even more inflammation. So, inflammation, one of the root issues with why disease manifests.
And some of you might be thinking, there's no way on earth I'm going to go walk barefoot. It's too cold, or it's too rocky, or I don't want to look like a weirdo. There are grounding straps that you can buy for your shoes. So if you're hell-bent on not walking barefoot, which is the best way to do it, there are grounding straps that you can buy off Amazon. They're fairly inexpensive. So look into that if you're not going to go barefoot. But you need to get grounded in order to, as my dad mentioned, reduce that charge. That charge creates inflammation and stress. It's part of our big problem. So let's move on to our next tip. This is number 5. And that is becoming aware of your news and social media inputs. So what channels are you watching on your TV? What social media accounts are you following on Facebook and Instagram and YouTube? Do they have a positive message? Do they have a negative message? Is it a gossip channel where everything's negativity and talking about other people and comparing? These are inputs that you do not want to absorb, because this will literally keep you in that subconscious programming. And these intelligent advertisers, these people who know what they're doing, know how to program you subconsciously. And this has been going on for eons. But on social media, you are bombarded with advertisements. You're bombarded with messaging that's making you feel like you need to be a certain way in order to be happy. You have to become cognizant of what you're exposing yourself to when you're watching TV or when you're on your phone and computer, because we're being bombarded. What do you have to add to this, Dad?
Yes, I would say this expands into, all segments of society and media and even entertainment. As example, nowadays, recently becoming more popular is like the scary movies, where the 16-year-old girl, comes home late at night and there's strange sounds coming from the basement and the power goes out, it's completely dark. And so she's going to go down in that basement in the complete dark and check it out. What's down there making that funny noise? And so movies like that get us into the fight or flight mode. You might think it's all fun and games, but subconsciously, these things add up to programming the way we think. And it's subconscious. So it's like you do not know it's happening. But these movies are coming out for a reason. You know, Hollywood and that whole industry has an agenda. And we're not saying, you know, never watch a scary movie, but we're saying be aware, become aware of how these organizations in our modern society are trying to program us to be lemmings that just consume whatever it is they want us to consume and leave us feeling like, you know, we need something to make ourselves happy. We have a deficiency so that we're not happy. And they make us feel lack, and they make us feel anger, and they make us feel fear. So if you watch something and you're a little jittery after it, you know, maybe take a break from that. See if after a week of taking a break from that input, you don't feel like a fog was lifted off your brain. You don't feel happier. You don't have joy, the joy of living. You know, so many of us have lost that. And that's one of the things that, you know, we really key on with our health coaching clients is we try to get the joy to be alive back into your life.
Yeah, and speaking of the health coaching clients, one thing we work with them on, especially on social media profiles, is kind of doing an inventory of people they're following and going through each account, like kind of going through the newsfeed and seeing how they feel when they see a certain picture. Do they feel joy, or are they starting to feel anger or judgment, or they feel competitive or unhappy about themselves? Like, oh, wow, look at that person. They're traveling the whole world and I'm stuck here in my office at work. You know, it creates this, like, I'm not doing good enough type of feeling. So go do an inventory of who you're following. If you feel that feeling when you come across someone's profile or their post, I recommend unfollowing them and replacing them with something that builds you up. Because if you are going to choose to use social media, make it a positive thing, things that build you up, that make you feel good. It's really important, especially with the statistics showing that we're spending hours and hours on our smartphone and social media every single day now. You need to make sure that your inputs are cleaned up on there. It's a big part of why we're so stressed out and unhappy as a society. So go clean that up. Anything you want to add before we move on to the next tip?
No, I think that's good. You know, this is something that affects all of us, and you know, you don't have to completely clean it up. If you just take some baby steps and see results, then you'll take the next step. And so that's one of the things we always try to get across to our health coaching clients is that if you make a little progress, then it gives you the incentive to go the next step.
And that's a great segue into our next point, which is you need to stop feeling guilty about the way you've been in the past. Part of the problem of why we stay stressed out is because we feel guilty after doing the thing that stressed us out. So as an example, maybe you're stressed out, so you decide to gorge down a tub of ice cream. And then afterward, you feel extremely guilty for doing that. To get rid of that guilt, it's just this vicious cycle. I'm gonna eat the ice cream again to get rid of the feeling of guilt, and then you feel guilty. So it's never ending. So if you can cut that cycle by just saying, like, you know what, I did it, so what, I'm moving on, I'll try and be better, and not blaming yourself and feeling shameful and guilty about it, you can break that cycle, that negative feedback loop. And when you start to do this throughout your life, looking at those things that, I can do better, but I'm not going to beat myself up anymore, that's a great step in the right direction in terms of reducing stress. Because guilt and shame are part of the stress response. Those are emotions that are within the sympathetic nervous system. So you want to axe those out as quickly as you can and try and replace, that bad habit or whatever with something positive, maybe one of our other recommendations, but stop feeling guilty. What do you want to add to this?
Yeah, so anything in the past, what you want, your especially your past mistakes that you may be feeling guilty about, what you want to do is not judge that, but learn from it so that the mistake can become wisdom. And so we stay in a positive frame of mind going, yeah, that was a mistake. I own up to it. I did it, but it's in the past and I'm in the present and in the future. So that way you can say, okay, well, maybe analyze it, go what led to it, so that you learn, so that you're wiser. So that is why that, if you ask most people that are tremendous leaders in whatever field and they had setbacks in their life, usually they'll say, well, I wouldn't change that, that bad thing that happened to me, because it led to what made me great. So we think of our mistakes as wisdom, then we don't have to feel down about it. We don't have to go into that vicious cycle of feeling worse and worse and just keep repeating the bad thing.
Exactly. And that takes the frame of mind where it's like my universe is working for me, not against me. You're not taking a victim mentality within your own reality. You're looking at it and saying, what's the lesson I can learn from this? What can I transmute into wisdom from this experience? So there's benefits to every experience. We need to start looking at it from that lens, and you'll feel less stressed out about it. So it's a good way to quit the blame game and just take accountability, learn the lesson, and move forward. All right, so let's move on to our next tip. This one's so important, and my dad alluded to this a little bit. We spend 95% of our time indoors societally now. 95%, that's extremely high, and I was pretty shocked, to be honest, when I first saw that statistic. But we're not out in nature anymore. And when we are in nature, we're covered up in clothes, we're hiding from the sun, we've really demonized it. So this tip is start incorporating 10 to 20-minute nature breaks throughout your day. And this is especially important if you're someone who works indoors or you're a business owner who's always inside. You need to go get outside. So what are the health benefits of starting to incorporate nature breaks into your day?
Well, the nature breaks just seem like common sense that, oh, connecting with nature, would be good for us. And then the idea of, humans were always in nature before we built this industrialized society where we all moved indoors to work and to live. And so that's a recent change. But there is now science behind all kinds of different aspects. We mentioned grounding and getting negative electrons, how it's anti-inflammatory. Well, in Japan, they practice what's called forest bathing, where as a treatment, say if you have depression or you have mental disorders or you have a physical disorder, they will prescribe, going out into the forest or going out into a waterfall is another one, to get into a waterfall. The forest bathing. So the forest bathing or getting in a waterfall or hearing the sound of running water, like getting next to a river or beach, all stimulate that vagus nerve or the parasympathetic nervous system. So we know it gets us out of fight or flight. But what they've also found is that trees give off an electromagnetic field that if we get up next to a tree, we get into that, and that possibly, it's not proven, but possibly has a benefit. And then leaves give off chemicals that actually stimulate the release of endorphins within us. So endorphins are the molecules the molecules are secreted by the adrenal gland. They're cleaved off through the action of sunlight. So sunlight on a precursor molecule cleaves off endorphin. And so these other scents or vibrations from nature can also do that. What does endorphin do? It gives us pleasure. This is the opiate, the natural opiate within us. It gives us pleasure. It makes us happy. It makes us satisfied. It's what gives us a runner's high. So that the exerciser, goes out and belts out a session of their intense exercise, our body releases the endorphins probably to reduce the muscle soreness we're going to have after working out so hard. So there's a lot of different ways to do it, but getting out of nature is something that almost everyone that does it feels it's good for them, feels a benefit, and it becomes a habit. And once you make it a habit, and usually that takes about 30 days of being consistent doing it, once you make it a habit, then you'll likely do it the rest of your life.
Yeah, and it can be difficult if you're so accustomed to being inside all the time to make the time to go do your nature breaks. But just try it, please. You'll come back to work or wherever refreshed every single time you do that. Go for a 15-minute walk outside. Go sit in the grass. Whatever it is, start prioritizing it in your life and you'll reduce your stress dramatically. So let's move on to the next tip. And this one's really important too. We don't want to be too attached to technology. We can oftentimes be the people, anytime the phone makes a ding sound, we're sprinting over to it like we're going to miss something. So one thing that we've implemented and that we've implemented in not only our own lives, but the lives of our health coaching clients is kind of structuring out times to use your technology. So what I mean by that is you can answer text messages only twice a day. Like at noon, you'll check your phone for text messages, and at 5 p.m., you'll check your phone for text messages or emails or whatever. So what's really important with this is that you retrain your contacts about how you communicate. So if you used to be the person who instantly answers the phone anytime someone texts you, you need to tell that person who's texting you all the time, hey, you know what? I'm only answering texts and emails twice a day now. So if you don't hear from me for a few hours, don't freak out. That's just the way I'm doing it now. Can you talk a little bit more about your experience with this and how it's changed things for you?
Yes, well, the high-tech issue, as Howard mentioned earlier, people are on social media for hours and hours, and obviously we're on social media too. We're here right now, but the problem becomes it becomes an addiction. So the social media creates an emotion. Now, when the emotion's created, like jealousy and anger or competition, or it could be a good emotion, love or happiness or joy. So you get the emotion, but it doesn't matter if the emotion is positive or negative. It still creates a response that becomes addictive over time. So that's why we'll look at the channel that's bashing Trump, and it can, or any political thing, right or left, bashing something, and it makes you tense, but you'll keep automatically going back to it. So it creates an addiction. And so breaking that addiction is difficult. Doing all the other things that we've already described before helps. And that's what we found in our health coaching and working on ourselves, is that the more of these things, especially the nature things, and getting the right inputs to our physiology, all that builds up our willpower, because it takes some willpower to break away from these things.
Yeah, and to your point, like we're obviously on social media right now. We used to have the limiting belief that because our business is run through social media, that's how we bring people in, that we personally need to be on social media all the time, checking comments. And it's like, that's just not true. You can very much still structure it. Even if your business relies on the internet, you can still structure your day in a way to where you're present all day and that you've allotted a certain amount of time to check in on your social media, check in on your business or your advertising, to where it's not this compulsive thing that you're constantly checking. When you do that, you're missing out on life, really. You're so obsessed with what's going on, not right here and now. It's pretty baffling. And as my dad mentioned, we get addicted to that. Even if, we know it's not good for us, we're emotionally addicted to it. So we have to put in a plan to break that addiction and start creating new habits so we can really start reducing that stress, being present, and just enjoying life. That's what this is all about. So addiction to social media creates a lot of stress from our experience. So this is a good way to break it. But you do need to notify those that care about you that you're doing this and that this is the way you're going to communicate from now on, so they don't freak out, and call the cops that you're missing. You got to let them know. All right, so I want to jump into the next one here. Non-native electromagnetic fields. You need to learn to mitigate them. So this kind of goes back to our high-tech world, but we are exposed to tons of non-native EMF, Wi-Fi, 5G, cell towers, the power grid, you name it. Can you give some practical steps to mitigate the non-native EMF and also talk about why the EMF is creating more stress?
Okay, well, I'll do the last one first. So the electromagnetic fields affect our electromagnetic fields. So as Howard mentioned, I believe earlier, that our heart puts off a very strong electromagnetic field. Our brain puts off a slightly or more weaker electromagnetic field. But we have these electromagnetic fields. They come from every cell in our body. Every mitochondria, so our mitochondria are little engines inside our cells. They have a little rotor in it that spins, and when that spins, it creates an electromagnetic field. So a lot of the signaling that goes on with those 37 trillion cells doing 100,000 chemical reactions per second, all that chaos seems like it's chaos, but what keeps it in order are the natural electromagnetic fields that come from internally, and they also come from our environment. And one of the big sources is the sunlight is an electromagnetic spectrum of frequencies. And then the earth also has its electromagnetic field, which ultimately also comes from the sun. So we have these native electromagnetic fields, which are kind of the environment that our cells were created or evolved into. So obviously, those are things that at the very least are neutral, and they're probably important. And then we put in a wave pattern that is non-native. So it's completely alien to our physiology. So the thing about man-made waves is they're always polarized. Okay, and I'm not going to get into the physics of that, but natural electromagnetic waves are not. So this difference causes different things to happen. What they found is like cell phone radiation or cell tower radiation activates a channel that lets calcium come into our cells. And calcium is a stress response. So calcium comes into our cells during stress, but it also is activated by these man-made frequencies. So we know that, studies in rats show it causes tumors. The government did a study that showed that. So there's no doubt it affects our biology. So what we recommend our health coaching clients do is mitigate it. So there's simple things you can do, like not carry your cell phone powered on all day, put it in airplane mode at least part of the day, use the speaker function or use headphones. Don't put it next to your brain. Studies of a functional MRI of a brain, when you put a cell phone here, completely changes the physiology in a diameter of about 6 centimeters from that cell phone. So we know that it activates these calcium channels that create inflammation within the cell. Inflammation, the reactive oxygen species, damage things. They need to be repaired. Well, we only repair when we're in the parasympathetic mode of our nervous system, which 90% of us never are. So you can see why our life expectancy is going down, why we have a disease explosion. We have seniors that are on 6 or more medications now, the average senior citizen. It's crazy, this world we live in. But you can turn your Wi-Fi off at night. You can keep your cell phone at a distance. You can turn off things in your power grid. Even the power grid has an electromagnetic field that is unnatural to the human body. So this all began back in the 1800s with electricity, and it's just been blossoming out. And now they want to put thousands of satellites in space, beaming us with more man-made electromagnetic fields. So we like people to be aware of it. We like people to try to mitigate, turn your Wi-Fi off at night, stay further away from devices or appliances. Don't be this close to your alarm clock, even if it's an electric alarm clock. that is putting an electromagnetic field through your brain.
Right, and these non-native EMFs, like my dad mentioned, they're proven to put you into the sympathetic response. They create a cascade of health problems. So it's important that you mitigate it. Like, yeah, we don't want to be fear-mongering and worrying too much about EMF because that can create more stress, but there are practical things that you can do to just mitigate it and not have to worry about it, just make it a habit. We don't want to take the chance with non-native EMF. All right, for our final tip, obviously there's a lot more that we can help you guys with in terms of reducing stress and optimizing your health. But for this video and the sake of time, this is our final tip for now. And this is to mind your exercise. So exercise is a big recommendation for reducing stress. And I would say a recommendation just for optimizing your health that you'll hear from pretty much everyone. Our take on exercise is a little bit different. Can you elaborate on this, Dad?
Yes, well, exercise is a double-edged sword. And so someone, let's take that person that has chronic fatigue and they're stressed out 95% of the time. And you take that person and they're doing boot camp or they're doing CrossFit and they go, yeah, I'm doing it because it's the only thing that makes me feel better. It's the only thing that makes me feel alive. Well, that person, in my opinion, is using the exercise like they would use coffee or cocaine or methamphetamine. They're getting a boost, but it's costing them because when you've been in fight or flight 24/7, 365, you've been burning energy at both ends for a long time and you don't have the energy to exercise and you really shouldn't be exercising. So we are not out there pushing exercise. We're out there pushing exercise to our clients or our friends or our family that is doing all the other stuff right. And they have this tremendous joy of being alive on this planet. And they want to go run to the top of the mountain because they have so much energy and they're feeling so good that they just want to challenge their physiology, which is what it's all about. The good side of exercise is if you don't exercise, we know that isn't good. You lose your muscles, you lose your ability to run. We know from all kinds of studies that people that are complete couch potatoes don't live as long as people who do a moderate. Now, the extreme exercise, they never outlive anybody, but it's the moderate exercise. You will definitely outlive a couch potato, but I'm talking about moderate and I'm talking about having managed your stress. Because if you don't manage your stress, doing CrossFit or doing high intensity intervals or all that stuff is going to make your problem worse and not better. So that's the exercise issue is, yes, it's a stimulus. It's a hormetic effect. When we run up a mountain, our muscles, get really stressed and they have micro tears. And when we rest the next day, if our parasympathetic nervous system is working, that's when we recover. Then it'll come in, build it up. And then next time we run up the mountain, it'll be easier and we'll tolerate it better. It'll be less sore. So exercise is good. Heavy exercise, which I did for years, I think is never necessarily better than moderate exercise. So we believe in moderate exercise. Heavy, if you're really, just jacked about it and it gives you something that other things in life can't give you, fine, go for it.
So again, these are 10 techniques. Hopefully you took some notes. If not, revisit this video. This is on social media for free for everyone. Like I said, our intention is to help humanity become less stressed. So feel free to revisit it. We have a ton of other videos too on our fan page as well as our YouTube channel. Now there is an opportunity, no pressure to take it, but if you're someone who would like to work with me and my dad in our team of experts to put together a foolproof plan of how you can get your stress under control and also a lot of other things in terms of optimizing your health, getting your body and your mind working together and really being able to live your best life, we do have some slots available in our coaching program. So I'll put a link in the description or somewhere around this video where you can go check that out. Again, it's not for everyone, but if you're someone who wants that extra help and would enjoy working with us, we'd love to have you apply and see if it's a good fit. Anything you want to add before we sign off?
No, I think these are things that you can't just think about. You need to implement, but you don't need to implement it all. You just take a step, even if it's a small step. That's the way to get started.
Exactly. Go implement, and we'll see you on the next video. Thanks, Dad.
Bye.